Before we get started, we'd like to thank Nationwide for sponsoring this episode of Let's Get Surety. When you partner with Nationwide Surety, you know you're working with a strong and stable carrier that has a wealth of experience. Nationwide Surety Operations specializes in both commercial and contract surety bonds to support local, regional, national, and international customers with operations in the United States. For more information on Nationwide Surety Solutions, visit nationwide.com/surety.
You're listening to Let's Get Surety. Let me hear your bonding talk with Kat Shamapande.
Hey everyone, it's Kat Shamapande. Thanks so much for joining us today for this episode of Let's Get Surety. I've got with me today my co-host, Mark McCallum, CEO of NASBP. Hey Mark, thanks for being on with me today.
Absolutely, Kat. I'm looking forward to it. I know we have a great guest, an important topic.
I know, I'm really excited to talk about this. We're going to be talking about digitization in the surety industry. And to do that, we have an expert guest. We've got Patrick McGinty, who's Tanubu Square Path Digital Business Development Advisor with Tanubu Square. Hey, Patrick, thanks for being on with us today.
Hey, Kat, thank you for having me. Mark, good to see you.
Good to see you.
It's great to have you on. So before we dive into this topic, Patrick, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about Tanubu Square?
Well, absolutely. First of all, my involvement with the surety business really is derived from being the former president of Surety Wave. And Tanubu bought Surety Wave in December of 2020. Up until that point, I was running Surety Wave, and we're in the process of developing the SurePath next generation, which is SurePath Digital. And just like it says, it's the digitization of the SurePath network. I'm quite proud of the SurePath network. It represents 40 of the top 50 international insurance brokers, as well as probably 75 of the next 100 insurance brokers. It is a system that's utilized every day in the surety industry. And just as a little heads up, we did do a webinar about how to create digital bonds a year ago at the beginning of the pandemic quarantine. So, I've got a passionate sense of today's subject.
Well, I think that leads us to a good place to start off. What do we mean by digitization? What is it that we're implying in digitizing the surety industry?
Well, the sharing of information is vitally important. And, with security and cybersecurity issues, everybody has wanted to create an absolute barrier around their databases. However, for the efficient utilization of some of that information, you have to have the ability to share it with others. And one of the biggest issues that I see is all of the silos that have been built over time contain massive amounts of information, and yet we can't share it with one another. So important decisions are not being made, not because the information is negative, it's just not available. So we're setting out to make it available to the surety industry.
We certainly are an industry that kind of harkens back to the past, some would say. And I know in past conversations, we talked about the use of typewriters still in many agencies. And although a lot of people are automating, as you said, that reaching out to multiple parties and then freeing up their data seems to still elude us. Although the pandemic seems to put a new urgency on doing this, as people not only want greater efficiency, but then they have safety and health issues as well to keep in the foremost of their minds. Where do you see things going, and what kind of steps has your company taken on that road to digitization?
Well, it's interesting you should mention that, Mark. If you would have asked me that question late 2019, maybe even early 2020, I would have said we're about 5 years, maybe 8 years away from a digitization of the surety industry. And what our limitations were, the momentum to continue to do things the way it's always been done is very hard to overcome. So you mail a physical document to an office and someone determines that that's a wet signature and a raised seal. However, that's not a very efficient process. And what happened when we had the quarantine COVID shutdown, however you want to term it, in March of 2020, all of a sudden, the people were not in the offices to receive those documents. The person who was checking those documents was at home, working from home, and people were trying to say, "Oh, how do we do it now?" I had a very major, one of the top 5 sureties, contact me and say, "Gee, how do we conduct this digitization remotely?" And I walked them through it, and they had 1,300 surety underwriting type employees, and they successfully tested and then made the bridge to a work from home environment. I want to add one other comment. This is not our first time at the rodeo. When Surety Wave bought the assets of InsureVision Technologies, they had an office in Sherman Oaks, California. The employees that worked out of that office commuted anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half each way every day. I was living in Redondo Beach at the time, and my commute was an hour in and an hour and a half back. So that's 2.5 hours of my working day that were just shot behind the wheel on the 405. And everyone that's ever seen a picture of the 405, yes, that's real. All those lanes of traffic that are stopped, both directions, that's real. So, having said that, we closed that office in January 2018. So Surety Wave has been working remotely since then. We've gone to a voice over internet protocol phone system. All of our employees have access to the internet. They have digital cellular network backup. So we perform the customer service and development of Surety Wave remotely. We're currently in, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 states with an employee force of about 12. We're actually in 6 states with an employee force of about 12.
So you're an example of a company who's used your technology to then have a remote workforce and get greater efficiencies.
Yes.
And then now you want to apply that into the surety world in different forms and fashions. Maybe we should step back for a second. And I know that people use a lot of different words that may mean slightly different things. Electronic bonds, e-bonding, digital bonds. Do you have kind of definitions of those words in terms of how you like them to be used?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked. First of all, the traditional process is to produce a physical document, whether it's done on a computer, a typewriter, or handwritten, whatever. That has been the traditional method of issuing a surety bond. We have been able, over the last 20 years, to create an electronic version of that document, and it's traditionally in a PDF format. So here is an electronic file representing that bond. So that's an electronic bond. However, it's not a digital bond. A digital bond is that plus all of the unique background historical documentation that goes with the bond. And that could be in various kinds of setup. But, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but I'm a CPCU. So I've been very involved with the Risk Stream Collaborative on the electronic power of attorney.
So, hey, Patrick, before you go on, could you tell us what the Risk Stream Collaborative is?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
It is a nonprofit arm of the Institutes for Property and Casualty Insurance. And they're the ones that have essentially gone and said, gee, how could we utilize a blockchain kind of approach? Now, I want to clarify another definition. Blockchain is to distributed ledger, like Kleenex is to facial tissue. But distributed ledger is a real concept that the Risk Stream Collaborative, part of the Institutes, is trying to embrace and figure out, okay, how do we do this? And how we do it is everybody has access to original data. Anybody changing that data breaks the distributed ledger, or in other words, breaks the blockchain, if you were to use that kind of term.
I think that's helpful to define blockchain. I know just that term alone will cause many people's eyes to glaze over and just feel confusion.
Well, I don't want them to glaze over because that's going to form the basis of trust. And let's face it, surety is a trust relationship. You trust the contractor to perform the work the obligee is paying for and deliver the completed project. So it's a matter of trust. So how do you validate all those elements of trust? And that's really what the Risk Stream Collaborative is trying to approach and develop. Now,
but that's kind of getting to the difference between the digital bond, which exemplifies all that due diligence, the ability to authenticate, validate, and so forth, versus a, quote, electronic bond, which may just be a electronic picture of a piece of paper.
Exactly.
Would you agree with that, Patrick?
I agree with it 100%. The picture that we should put in our mind is that of a wheel with spokes. And those spokes go out to, the obligees, the principals, the underwriters. And in the center of those spokes is the agent. In today's world, agents issue surety bonds.
Right.
Now, I remember way back when agents used to issue all kinds of insurance policies. But, that's sort of dating me a little bit. But right now, surety bonds are issued by an agent, and they're signed with a grant of authority from the surety underwriter. And as long as the agent stays within those guidelines, that is a valid instrument. Now, you can argue, did the agent have the authority? Yes, no, maybe. However, to the consuming public, that's a real document that carries the full force and strength of the underwriter, be it a corporate underwriter or an individual underwriter.
You kind of hit on something I think that is an interesting hurdle for the surety industry to get across. And that is, to a certain extent, we've conditioned obligees, officials, and others to expect a paper document with a wet signature and impressed seals and all the rest. And obviously, we're going to have a lot of education to do to then get them to understand that what they might be getting as a digital outcome is every bit as effective and maybe even more secure than that piece of paper. How do we do that? How do you envision us taking those steps to get greater buy-in?
Well, it's going to be a tremendous education effort. Mm-hmm. But government, is both the recipient and the change agent. we cannot do work like we had been doing 20 years ago. So government has allowed for the execution of almost any kind of document to validate that you are who you are. I believe the most impressive thing that's about to happen is that the iPhone is going to end up being the fingerprint of record. My iPhone opens on my facial recognition. My iPad opens on my thumbprint recognition.
Mm-hmm.
So my identity is more associated with that electronic document or that electronic device than anything else. Who needs a notary at that point? And I believe that as the industry embraces some of the technology, it'll become more and more effective. Think about an indemnity agreement. Say
Right.
the principal's 200 miles away from his office, but he opens up his iPhone and says, I have read this document, I agree with the terms and conditions, and I approve it right now. Now,
Right.
how do you validate it? In our
Mm.
case, we house 57 different group electronic powers of attorney. They are accessed solely by the underwriting administrator of the surety. They grant and revoke access to those EPOAs. So when an agent is granted that authority and exercises it in SurePath, it's as valid as it gets because his signature or her signature is validated by a third party IdenTrust vehicle. And I think it's more valid than any kind of a wet signature that could have been forged or a seal that may have been, picked up by somebody else and crimped that document. I don't know.
Right. Right. Well, like with the power of attorney, I guess a contracting officer is only going to look at the face of that document to determine its validity. But if they know there's a process by which those identities were authenticated, as you said, that should be a more secure process.
I
But
believe it
again,
is, but it's going to have buy-in. The
right.
biggest the biggest challenge today, or probably prior to COVID quarantine, was how to get the buy-in of the obligees.
Right.
And I think you're getting the buy-in faster today than ever before. The number of obligees now accepting electronic bonding has almost tripled in the time period of just the last 12 months.
Which
So
is very heartening to hear. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Kat?
Yeah, I was
Why?
just going to
One of the
go ahead,
things that
Patrick.
I wanted to mention today, and this is something that's near and dear to my heart, but think about some of the major IT kind of companies doing major projects. Apple's new, headquarters that looks like it's a spacecraft from somewhere else. Um, was built by somebody. Now, did they want the cash from the contractor? No, they wanted that headquarters building built. So the performance and then the risk management that goes with it is critically important and it'll become more important out into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I still think, obviously the private sector can move much quicker towards
Mm.
technology adoption. Uh, Bonding obviously has a big component in the public procurement arena, which is then dictated by procurement codes, laws, statutes, and the law tends to lag behind technological developments.
Mm.
So I was curious if in the public arena, are you coming across and having dialogues with officials and others to convince them that they can move in this direction and that they can also be a change agent and try to change regulations and laws that, for example, notarization that may limit their ability to move in this direction?
Yes, but it's a slow process. And
Okay.
I was approached by a number of people studying this kind of issue, and one of them was a Rutgers-based group doing work for the New Jersey Municipality Association, whatever. And
Yeah.
that really did open my eyes that all these places want to have more efficiency. But to
Mm.
have more efficiency, some of the codes have to change.
Yep. Well, and I imagine too that as an industry, we have to be able to show how it can be done
Yes.
in order to have those laws get the impetus behind legislators to change those laws. And right now, we're all taking those steps, I would imagine. But certainly, there are a number of statutes and regulations that are going to have to be surmounted or at least changed in order to get widespread buy in. It sounds like that's been your case and looking into this. And then, surety rights in so many diverse areas with so many different public owners on so many different wavelengths. And not to down attorneys as a recovering one myself, but they tend to like things without ambiguity. And as you're moving to new technology, that's going to introduce a lot of ambiguity,
Mm.
at least in how things are going to be interpreted. Um, I'd be curious if you could characterize some of your other conversations, particularly maybe in New Jersey, because I know that there was a new law that was, or at least a bill that was introduced in New Jersey to allow more or greater acceptance of electronic bonding. And I imagine maybe you were part of that discussion.
I wasn't part of what the result has been. I may have been part of some of the research done to get them there. We're very open with, how we assist agents and brokers in the delivery of an electronic instrument, and then how it's validated. I mentioned earlier that we house about 57 group EPOAs. They represent about 150 sureties, maybe a few more. And some of those EPOAs are on multiple sureties writing paper. So, what does that really mean? You could go to any one of them and validate the bond. But each surety has a slightly different approach, and they have a slightly different website. There's no uniformity. You
Mm.
come to us and validate the bond. We don't care what surety it's on. We validate the bond. That bond validation number is legitimate, and it's an encrypted link to the bond record. So in obligee, are you going to go to 57 or are you going to go to SurePath? Okay. So that was my pitch to the New Jersey group doing the study. And I think what they're doing is they're taking some of our technology and then moving it forward within the confines of their state and local codes. Most people want to modernize everything. They really don't want to hold back. The days of holding up the bond form, whether it was electronically produced or an original blue paper or whatever, and putting it in the window and making sure all the words line up right, I think are pretty much over. I hope so. But some of this stuff still has lingering implications. And,
Right.
I'm an advocate for change, um, because we can't keep doing things the same old way and have the results be different. But you're not looking for every stream and every drop of water. You're only looking for the ones that are going south. And I believe that the surety industry is going to find itself being much more of a risk management advocate than it's ever been. If you've got a major contractor that's doing 100 jobs and they report their work in progress, and it takes 2 days for somebody to manually input that information, how is the underwriter going to have actionable information? How is he going to know that there's going to be something in that 100 jobs that's a problem? They're not. So you have to have some way of taking the data that's flowing at them and sort through it and say, where's the one job that's giving this guy heartburn? And can we help and assist keeping it from going into a lawsuit? Unfortunately, most first notices of loss in the surety industry are some attorney's demand letter. And that's sort of the wrong place to be at the wrong time. So you want to be able to get ahead of some of that data that's out there flowing. You can't do it if you don't have digital information rivers. You can't do it unless you have the analysis tools. They can see it.
That's great. Thank you so much, Patrick. It's been really good talking to you about digitization and e-bonding and that whole change in our industry. We'll have to have you back again sometime on another episode.
You've been listening to Let's Get Surety, brought to you by the National Association of Surety Bond Producers. For more information about the NASBP and its members, visit nasbp.org.
Before we go, we just want to say thank you again to Nationwide for their generous support of this episode of Let's Get Surety. For more information on Nationwide Surety Solutions, visit nationwide.com/surety.